Welcome to On the Sidelines, the show that usually discusses sports and how sports intersects our lives. However, this series of shows will mostly depart from sports and will center upon an event that is still being discussed long after most sporting events have faded from our memories. Throughout U.S. history, there are dates that are burned into our memories, such as December 7th, 1941, and September 11th, 2001. This year, we commemorate the 60th anniversary of another such date, November 22nd, 1963, the day that the 35th President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, was assassinated. Inspired by the book, Where Were You?, that was compiled and edited by Gus Russo and Harry Moses for the 50th anniversary, I wondered what ordinary U.S. citizens were doing on that ever-so-ordinary Friday before Thanksgiving in 1963 that turned out to be anything but ordinary. For some people, the news of the assassination was received in this manner.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago. Vice President Lyndon Johnson has left the hospital in Dallas, but we do not know to where he has proceeded. Presumably, he will be taking the oath of office shortly and become the 36th President of the United States.
But for many Americans, the news would be heard much differently. On the Sidelines is so grateful to the current residents of Westborough who remember November 22nd, 1963, and who graciously shared their stories with us. Let us listen to their memories of this event. We welcome Judith Meltzer, the Director of Professional Licensing from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and also on the Registrar of Voters here in Westborough. Judy, welcome to On the Sidelines.
Thank you very much.
You know, once upon a time, maybe you, as a CPA, you probably reissued my renewal license.
Absolutely.
So I thank you for renewing my license so I can practice as a CPA. But let's go back to 1963. I wasn't a CPA in 1963.
And I wasn't working for the state.
And you weren't with the state. So what was going on in your life? And then we'll go to November and John F. Kennedy.
In 1963, I lived in Peabody, Massachusetts, and I had a husband and 2 children. One was age 3 and one was 1.
So we had a young family at that time.
Right,
yeah.
Right, yeah.
So John F. Kennedy, president from Massachusetts, everyone's kind of excited on that, and then we have November.
Well, I was always interested in politics and was a member and president of the League of Women Voters. So I was always involved, and I still am, in the democratic process and the importance, and loved having this young Kennedy family in the White House.
Mm-hmm. So do you remember November 22nd, where you were?
I remember November 22nd. I was in a toy store in Saugus, Massachusetts, to buy my 2 little ones a toy. Now, I didn't usually buy them toys, and maybe I was going to celebrate Thanksgiving with something special for the children. But I was in the store and somehow heard the news and left without buying anything. Of course, the 2 little ones were very upset.
Now, they were with you?
Yes, and they were with me, and they didn't understand Well, I didn't buy them anything.
Kind of a mother were you?
And, you know, raced home and like everyone else in the world turned on the TV and watched it for the weekend.
Well, I think that's right. It's probably the first news event that we kind of were glued to the television. Any, back then, any problem with voter registrations or people with Kennedy? It seems like we never had those problems until recent, but you've been that for many years.
Maybe we were naive. Maybe it was simpler times. I don't remember there ever been any issues. I don't remember there being the strife that there is today, or the disagreement. I think our Congress worked much better because they worked on a bipartisan basis for the good of the country, and I don't think that's true anymore.
Right. And of course, John F. Kennedy was from Massachusetts, so he was our guy.
Right,
and so must have, the people in Peabody probably, even though he wasn't from Peabody, must have been pretty popular, I assume.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. We're with longtime Westborough resident Hank Rauch and a professional civil engineer. Hank, welcome to On the Sidelines.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Good to be here is right. We're going back to 1963. I don't know if you were an engineer then or what was going on, where you were in your life, but can you give us a little background there?
Sure, Paul. In '63, I graduated from the university, Carnegie Mellon University, in the spring of 1963.
Okay, so Kennedy was president. You graduated from college.
Kennedy had just been, he was elected, what, 1960?
Right.
So he was the president, and I was just getting out of college. And oh, by the way, we were in the Vietnam War at that time.
That was starting,
and the Vietnam War was just starting to ramp up. And of course, being that age, I had to sign up for the draft. And I was very fortunate because I was a student. I automatically got a deferment. And when I graduated, I was kind of worried that, you know, my deferment was going to go away, but it was good till the end of the calendar year. So I figured, well, I'll be okay.
You're good for 63.
No, it was good for 63. Being kind of young and not understanding the way of the world as much as I do today, I figured, well, we'll have plenty of time to take care of this problem. Because I wasn't particularly interested in being in the military or going to war or whatever.
Right.
But so I took a job working for a steel company.
This is in Pennsylvania?
This was in, actually, I was living in Pennsylvania at the time, and the job I took, they assigned me to a training program in Cleveland, Ohio. At that time, Cleveland was a major industrial center. Ford Motor Company had a huge factory. Actually, most of the Ford Motor Company's engines were produced in Cleveland, Ohio. The chemical business was really huge. They had all kinds of refineries and chemical plants on all along the river that led into Lake Erie. And the steel company had a large plant. I think they must have had 150 acres, but a huge plant on the banks of the river there. And they picked the river because it was good transportation when they built the place. And also they needed the water. They needed huge amounts of water to cool all their equipment and such. So they hired me and sent me down there to go to work and to orient me to being in that industry that was kind of different. They assigned me to spend 6 months working in the factory with a small group of men, 4 or 6 men, as an electronic repair technician. So that was part. They were gonna educate me and help me understand what it was like to work inside of a modern factory.
Yeah, right. So you're a young college grad, and your first job out in the world now.
Out in the world, and thinking I'm going to set the world on fire. Went through the summer. Actually, at that point, the woman I'm now married to, my wife Joan, she was still living in Pittsburgh. And we were going together. We weren't married yet, so I lived in Cleveland during the week, and I commuted on the weekends back and forth to Pittsburgh. It's about 125 miles. So, you know, in those days, that kind of distance was like maybe a 3-hour drive. and back and forth, and had a very understanding family, so I could stay with her family when I was in town, and that way I didn't have to worry about hotels or any of that.
Yeah.
That was a big help to a kid that just first job trying to figure out how to pay off the loans and pay off the car and everything else. So that was good. It was good days. I enjoyed it. And Kennedy, at that point, I had grown up in a pretty conservative household, and folks were concerned about Kennedy, that he might be just too liberal. The fact that he was a Catholic also concerned some folks. My family didn't worry about him being a Catholic. They worried about him being just maybe too liberal. But boy, I looking back on it, and at the time, I thought he was doing a great job. He really helped us through some very difficult situations. He was oriented toward helping people. As for a college student at that time, Kennedy formed the Peace Corps.
Yeah, he did. Oh.
And amongst the college population, that was a very popular move. Right. I knew some folks who went into the Peace Corps. I thought about it myself, but I couldn't. I needed to work for a living to make some money. So everybody, again, all the people I was with and myself, we really were pleased with what Kennedy was doing. We could look forward to him making a lot of progress. He also seemed to have good political instincts. He seemed to understand how to get things done, right, which was pretty important. Actually, even having made the extremely unusual choice of Lyndon Johnson as his running mate.
I think they were trying to hide Lyndon.
Yeah, they chose Lyndon because Lyndon would bring in a lot of votes, particularly the Southern vote.
That's true, yeah.
And the Southeastern Texas and all through the South. Lyndon would temper some of the concern folks had about Kennedy being a white person from liberal Massachusetts, one of those
Catholic,
Massachusetts people. And you never saw Johnson. I mean, Johnson was hidden. Johnson was off. I don't know what he was doing, but he wasn't real public.
He wasn't in the picture.
Yeah. Bobby Kennedy was the big person you saw in the picture, and some folks of that sort. But we thought Kennedy was doing a great job. Some things we were concerned about him being in Vietnam, but we believe. I mean, most of the people I knew absolutely believed that the U.S. was making the right decision
at that point in time.
At that point in time, we believed in the so-called domino theory and things of that sort. It wasn't until much later that we sort of understood, well, maybe it wasn't the way
a little different looked, story, right? Yeah.
So that's where we were.
And then November 22nd came.
Yeah, November 22nd, 63. Wow. Again, that was a Friday. So Friday, my mind is all wrapped up. How do I get out of here?
You're on your way back.
Go back to visit with my girlfriend.
Yeah.
And have a good home cooked meal that I didn't have to cook myself, and such. And that afternoon, I had to teach a class, so I had to go out into one of our facilities, which was probably about a mile by road from where my base was, from where my electronic shop was. Right. I went out. I drove out there, and I went out and I taught a class. This is in the afternoon. Class started at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because that was sort of the end of the shift for the folks working. Right. So I had a group of 20, 25 men came out of the factory. I suspect they were just worried about going home too. But taught the class for an hour, and I still remember I was teaching them. Trying to help them understand that the company had introduced to that factory a sophisticated analog computing system that was used to help to support one of the key processes. Mm-hmm. That was the first analog computer that ever had been in that business. None of these folks knew anything about it. And I was trying to teach them about how the analog computers worked and how they did this magical mathematics that was very complex. And don't worry about the complex mathematics, but here's how they work, and here's what you have to do to troubleshoot them and repair them. I was.
And you're doing this on a Friday
afternoon.
Doing this
on a Friday afternoon, right? And you know, class was just about over, and somebody came broken in. I don't even remember who it was, but somebody came broken in and says, "Hey guys, you got to go listen to the radio or find a television or something. There's big news going on. The president's been shot." And at that point, all we knew is he'd been shot. And there was disbelief. How could that happen? What's going on? I mean, folks were just really concerned. And, you know, everybody kind of split and ran and went. I went back to my shop, and folks said, yeah, we're all going home. You know, we're all wrapping it up for the day and going home. We don't really know what's going on. It's just a news feed coming through. He was in Dallas and he was shot, and we don't know where he's at or what's happening. So I launched. I mean, I left there, and I had like a 3-hour drive. But at that point in time, believe it or not, I didn't have a radio in my car.
I was going to say, all cars didn't have radios back in that day. Yeah.
No. Hey, the radio cost extra money.
That's correct.
To think about it now, why would you? But it was enough of a difference. The car just didn't have a radio in it.
Yeah.
So I was totally out of touch from probably 4 o'clock in the afternoon till I get to 7 o'clock. Then I get there and find out, wow.
So you're driving in radio silence.
I'm driving radio silence. I have no idea. I know
what's going on.
I know something's going on, but I don't know what it is. But at one level, it was important to me, but it was not nearly as important to get to Pittsburgh to go visit with my girlfriend. I haven't seen her for a week.
Yeah, priorities.
Really, and she at those days she was working the night shift, so I would get there like 7 o'clock at night, and she had to go to work at like 11 o'clock.
Okay.
So
short time there.
You sure don't want to be late.
Yeah.
We got there, and my father-in-law had a television, and I mean everybody is literally glued to the television. What's going on? What's happening? The stories, folks, they knew he had been shot. I don't remember whether it was clear at that point that he was dead or not, but I believe it was. Right, and folks were trying to figure out where are we going from here. I mean the news, the newscasters were in shock.
I think the country was.
The whole country, went into shock. Everybody went into shock. We don't know what we're going to do next. And quite honestly, spent the next 48 hours basically glued to the television. Wasn't busy eating or doing something like that, sleeping. You were glued to the television to see what's going on.
What's going to happen? Yeah.
And I honestly don't remember when the funeral happened. It was later. It was after the weekend, I believe.
I forget myself.
But I honestly remember. I remember. The casket being drawn on a caisson through the streets, and I remember. I clearly the image I clearly remember was the black horse with a saddle and no rider,
the riderless,
and the boots in the stirrups backwards, tall, tall knee-length, shiny boots, and boy, people crying in the streets and.
And it was Thanksgiving week.
Right.
So did you go back to Cleveland?
I had to go back to Cleveland and then come back.
Cleveland.
Yep.
Oh, my God. So you had a lot of driving. All this is happening.
So I had gone back Sunday night, and I would have come back Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah.
And, trying to catch the details on the radio. And even all through Thanksgiving, all through that week, they were continually replaying and running darn near continuous coverage of what's happening.
Yeah, it was CNN before CNN. I think.
Right.
We never knew. Yeah.
And a lot of amazing things about it, Paul. When the country went through a real crisis, there was a man who absolutely was a charismatic, charming, a leadership figure for the entire country, maybe for the world. And all of a sudden, he's gone, and nobody knows what's going to happen next.
That was the fear of the unknown.
The fear. We were at the height. That was at the height of the Cold War. We were absolutely deathly afraid that the Russians were going to do something. That they were going to take advantage of this potential chaos. That something was going to happen. That the United States might not be able to react because what's going to happen with our government? Is it going to go into paralysis or whatever? Somehow we went through all of that. we came out the other side, and you know, we're
for better or worse, here we are.
Yeah, we're better folks.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. We appreciate all those memories. It's great. It's 60 years, but it seems in some ways like it was yesterday.
Yeah, but there's just details that you push the right buttons, and details start, strange images or pictures of things come into your head. Watching Jack Ruby, and sitting there and wondering, how did this man, this Jack Ruby, how did he get? And apparently, what came out later is he was a buddy of some of the policemen.
Yeah, he was well known there.
He was well known. They allowed him in because he was a friend of theirs, and I mean, no weapons checks were done in those days. You could actually get on an airplane and fly without taking your shoes off.
Different times, yeah, different times.
So that's good, Paul.
Okay, well,
appreciate talking to you.
Well, thanks again. Thanks for coming
welcome.
in.
Well,
thank
good.
you. We're with Bob Gasser, environmental consultant. Welcome, Bob, to On the Sidelines.
Thank you, Paul. Nice to be here.
Now, for On the Sidelines, we must do full transparency. That's what we do nowadays. It seems everybody has to be transparent. So you and your wife, Maria, and I guess we're outlaws or whatever we are related, because your daughter, Jennifer, married my son, Jonathan.
This is true.
But back in 1963, I don't think there was not a glimmer for them, and our whole lives were different back in then. What do you remember back in, where were you in 1963, and especially let's hone in on after that, November of 63?
Well, I was a student at Manhattan College in the Bronx, and on that day, when Kennedy was assassinated, it was the last day of class. It was a Friday, and this was my last class for the week. I was in philosophy class, and it was a beautiful day. We got outside of the class, and the sun was shining, and it was like 65 degrees. It was like, you didn't even need a coat. And we got outside, and I noticed, there was not too much movement around.
Now, Manhattan College is in the
Bronx.
In the Bronx, okay.
Yeah,
in the Bronx, okay.
You had to take 2 trains to get there. We lived in Queens.
Yeah.
And you'd take the A train all the way to Yankee Stadium, 168th Street, and then you took an elevator down to the IRT, and then from there you went to 242nd Street, which was the end of the line for the IRT. And the whole campus was on a hill, and so you're always walking uphill, uphill, uphill. And when I got out of class, we were kind of like pretty much at the top of the hill, and there was like a brick wall that, surrounded the building that we were in. It was, you could just sit on it. The students would sit on there, and they would, talk, and so we got out of class, and I noticed, there was no activity. It was just kind of dead. And there was one guy there had a transistor radio, and then he told everybody, he says, listen to this, and Kennedy's been shot, and everybody just, they kind of froze in their place. It was just like, I can't believe this. And, we just hung around for a few minutes, and then I just, I commuted. I had an hour and a half ride on the subway, so just went back to the subway station.
Now, did you know that he had passed away then? Or
no,
we
knew that he was shot.
Right, yeah.
It was like around 2 o'clock or so in the afternoon. I don't think he was officially designated as assassinated until an hour or two later. But just walked down the hill. I was all by myself, and nothing. It was just...
New York City was not...
The whole city. I mean, you got onto the subway, and like I said, there was 2 trains that I would ride on. Nothing. Just stone-cold silence. And got home and, had talked to my sister. I asked her about it. She did the same thing. She had 3 trains to take. She was in high school. And when she was there, somebody had a radio in the classroom, and the nun in the class was chastising the girl, for you know, making some commotion. And then finally she found out that, you know, Kennedy was assassinated or shot. And, you know, so then her and her two friends, they took the 3 trains back home, and they were all in tears. And so it was pretty much the same thing. Maria, likewise. I mean, she, you know, we all commuted, you know, like she went to high school in Brooklyn at St. Joseph's High School, and the same thing. You know, they came out, just rode the subway, and the subway was usually like, especially there was a lot of kids on the subway. You know, all these kids going to high school back and forth, and you know, you'd walk from one train car to the next and back and forth. There was, you know, a lot of movement and talking and excitement. Everybody just stayed in their place, and that was it.
Just eerie silence for New York City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we got home, and everybody was just glued to the TV set. You know, Walter Cronkite was on air and, you know, doing his thing. That's the way it was. You know, that was his closing comment, and then following, I guess the next day. No, the next day was Saturday. Mm-hmm. Sunday, we went to church. Everybody prayed in church. And then we got home, and then back to the TV. And then we saw Jack Ruby shooting Lee Harvey Oswald right on TV.
Yeah, that was live back then.
It was live right there. You know, they were bringing Oswald in for arraignment or whatever. He came out of the door. There was a sheriff with him, and the next thing you know, this guy comes out of the darkness and bam, 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 shoots him. So that was the rest of the year. That's all you saw on TV was, you know, where the angle was and where was he assisted with somebody else? Was there connection with Russia? You know,
nobody knew. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the thing there is that news wasn't what it, now there's news all the time, but that to me was the first time we were glued to the TV, and they were covering news just about all the time. That was the story.
And nobody really looked at the TV set like we do today. I mean, it was like, you know, you got home from work, you know, you wait till your father got in, everybody sat down, had dinner.
Right.
And then, you know, you might go to the living room and do your homework. My father read the newspaper. And, you know, maybe you'd put on TV, you know, for a short period of time or something. I know my mother watched the soap operas. You know, she had one soap opera that she watched, you know, for 20 minutes in the afternoon before we got home.
A little peace and quiet, yeah.
Yeah. And that was it. I mean, the TV was just, it was there, but not 24/7.
And do you remember if Kennedy was a, you know, popular name or popular president in, you know, the part of New York you were in?
Oh, yeah. You know, he was, you know, he was the first, you know, he was young.
Yeah.
First Catholic president. He had a beautiful family. You know, every time you saw him on TV, he was either sailing his boat or he was playing football on the grass in Cape Cod. You know, and he went through all this other stuff. You know, with the missile crisis, he put the man on the moon.
Right.
You know, he was just, you know, everybody just revered him. You know.
Yeah, it was a new frontier. And
yes.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for coming on and giving
pleasure.
us your reminiscence. Thank you very much, Bob.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
On the sidelines, also Don Bouffard, who had a career as an investment advisor. But let's go back to November of '63. Don, welcome, and what was going on back in November of '63 in your life?
Oh, well, thanks for inviting me, Paul.
I'm glad to have you.
Actually, I was on the other side of the world.
Literally?
Literally on the other side of the world. I was in Bangkok, Thailand, and I was in the Air Force. And it was, November 22nd, and for me it was the 23rd.
So you had the time difference.
Had the time difference, so it was.
So it's almost a half a day time.
So it was.
Yeah.
It was, but that was Saturday morning in Thailand.
Oh, for you it was Saturday, not Friday.
It was Saturday.
Yeah.
So what was really unusual is there was a commander's call to assemble at the JustMag compound where we worked.
So would this have been in the morning, not because of the time difference? When?
I think it was early afternoon on Saturday.
On the next day, yeah.
Which was unusual because we rarely got called to any kind of an assembly. But everybody said, okay, you know, dress in your military clothes, which was unusual.
Oh, they had you dress up. Oh, I see. Yeah.
Well, the unit I was in, we wore civilian clothes when we were in Thailand. So anyway, we got the call. I said, this is really weird. So we went to the JustMag compound where all of the military and civilians in Bangkok worked, and it was packed. Everybody was there. So I went up to the office where we worked, and we went out on the balcony, and you know, everybody assembled, and they called it to order. It was very formal. It was really unusual. And the commandant of the JustMag unit called everybody to attention, and then he had his prepared remarks. So everybody said attention, and really focused in. I think something really bad has happened. We've been attacked. You know, it wasn't December 7th.
Well, you were conjuring up what he had to say, but you had no idea.
Well, our parents' generation, you know, the December 7th, everything,
right.
And they think about that, and our kids think about 9/11.
Right.
So this was our
generation.
Yeah, this was our generation. So then he read the statement, the president has been assassinated. And I don't remember clearly what was said after that because everybody was in shock. So I think, I think it was pretty quiet for quite a while. But being in the military at that time, people get tense pretty quickly. And I remember it being a very, very tense time, and we really didn't know much because it happened in the afternoon, so it was kind of the, let's see, it happened noontime, so that would have been about midnight Bangkok time.
Your time, yeah, that time.
And we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have Twitter.
Instant communication.
We didn't have direct messages. Yeah. We didn't have any of that stuff. So this was the first indication that we had, and so that's my recollection of that day.
And he was the commander-in-chief. I mean, all of a sudden, your commander-in-chief has been replaced.
Yeah,
has been replaced.
And so it was kind of an interesting, to say the least, it was an interesting day.
You were in the service.
Yep.
And you probably had Republicans, Democrats, all different people from the United States serving with you. Any thoughts on Kennedy, about what they thought about John F. Kennedy?
It really, things are very polarized today. In the 50s and 60s, it was more of a race-oriented time. Mm-hmm. So the tensions were really, race, where you were from. I remember I was stationed in Texas and Louisiana, so there was a lot of Yankees versus Southerners, but it wasn't quite so political at that time. I don't think we thought of it in terms of Republicans and Democrats like everybody thinks about. Whenever anything happens today, it's was that person a Democrat or a Republican or far right or far left. So no, I think everybody was pretty much in shock at that point.
So you would have, I don't know when you would have returned to the United States, but did you feel a different country, or?
Well, let's see. I was in my early 20s. I was 21 at that time, and I don't think so. I think that that was bad enough, but that has happened in our history before.
Right.
But then I think when Robert Kennedy was assassinated, I think that, and Martin Luther King was assassinated, I think it was at 64?
68.
68.
Yeah.
So during that, as things kept going in that direction, then I think, people realized we're living in a different time.
Yeah.
So, but I don't remember that being that much of an emphasis at the Kennedy thing. It was just And whether the Warren Commission was right or not, I think everybody felt comfortable that it was a one-off kind of a thing, and then it was a lone assassin. There was a lot of speculation, obviously, because of Bay of Pigs and at that time. So, that's basically the way it was.
Well, we're glad you made it back from Bangkok.
So
and we
am
want
I.
to thank you for being on the show.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Don.
Thanks. Thanks for the invite.
That concludes part 4 of our 5-part series, Westborough Remembers November 22nd, 1963. I hope that you will join us for the remaining parts and more memories from the people of Westborough. Until then, this is Paul McGrath saying thanks for watching, and I hope to see you at the game, and if you're not playing in the game, I hope to see you on the sidelines.